All right, welcome back to another Coffee with Corvertis. It's good to be back after a brief absence. And once again, I am joined by my stellar colleague, Jennifer Hugo. Jen, how are you doing on this wonderful Colorado Wednesday that we're having?
It is an especially wonderful Colorado Wednesday. I am doing fabulous. I have a couple of my feline coworkers right here that are, oh, she went away, or she can't quite be seen very easily. There she is. Who are both living their core values right now to the fullest, like we all should be. But we've been having a really great fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that your cats are very involved in what we're doing. So good on them.
Fully
Yes,
engaged right now.
yes, absolutely. That is very important. Well, good. I'm glad that your day is going well. We have an exciting topic to touch on today. So we know that leaders often have access to so many different data points on their employees, anything from sales metrics to customer satisfaction scores, of course, depending on the position or the industry, and of course, the big one being performance data. So what we want to talk about today is what happens when leaders decide to take it a step too far, when they decide to gather data on their people that has no relevance to the job or to performance. And even beyond that, what happens when that data is used illegally and unethically to make decisions around compensation or even promotion opportunities. So to set the picture here, tell the story, that's exactly what landed a global retail clothing company a major news headline recently. Intrusive data collection, analysis of the activities of so many of its employees. So leaders were conducting these regular back to work style interviews or informal discussions, as they called them, with their employees following any type of work absence. Of course, employees, probably viewed this process as leaders just getting to know them, checking on their well-being, so on and so forth, after any type of absence. So data was gathered on things around illnesses, family problems, religious beliefs, even what employees were doing on vacation. And that data was used to create profiles for input on employment related decisions like compensation or promotion opportunities. Even more so, these profiles were actually made available to over 50 different leaders in the company, giving them access to data and information on their employees' private lives. So, with the picture set here, Jen, given our IO backgrounds, both of us being in positions to really help leaders develop and influence their people, what were some of your immediate reactions when you came across this story initially?
Right. Thank you, Sammy. Give just a really wonderful introduction. Uh, so the first thing that came to mind for me was just what tools and support were maybe these leaders missing that led them to go down this path. So there's so many wonderful things you can do with all the data that we have available with a call center where there's so many different metrics that potentially you could track. There really isn't a need to be, I mean, it's great to connect with your team after an absence and be on top of who they are and their whole selves, but to be using this sort of information and collecting it, it makes me wonder what happened before this and what kind of environment was it and the employee experience overall that these leaders decided to take this action. So from that industrial organizational psychology perspective, that's what first comes to mind. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, that's a really great takeaway. And I remember us talking about that a little bit off the air,
Mhm.
if you will, that, perhaps leaders were struggling with things around, performance or attention at this location. And so yeah, I think that in itself, that possibility does make it seem a little more plausible as to how all of this could have started in the first place. So, if you're really getting to know your employees, like if they are having problems outside of work or if they're dealing with something extremely stressful, you can make the argument
Right.
and kind of see how that could impact their performance. Absolutely. I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I had was um, I was just concerned really that so many leaders were aware of and involved in this procedure. I mean, we're talking at least 50 or upwards of 50. And so you have to wonder if it was coming from a place of simply, perhaps being uneducated about the types of data that can be used to make employment decisions, or perhaps even like a fear of retaliation if any one leader were to speak up on the issue.
I think about groupthink as well, that if you had a cohort of people that felt this was a viable path and they had enough clout, and then it's difficult for others to step up and challenge and say, you know what, this isn't the right thing to do. And just keeping your team educated, if you're a big global company, not only supported but also educated on legislation and what are the right and wrong things to do around performance and data. And really it was the handling of the data that got them into trouble. So we'll include some links to the situation below in the description so that you can learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point. And I think, there's so many different directions that we can kind of take the situation and touch on so many different things. Just really quick here, I think another thing that to hit on is, in addition to employees losing out on promotion opportunities, there's also likely been a loss of trust in leadership from those who are still with the organization, specifically that location. So Jen, I was wondering, do you have any thoughts on ways in which leaders can rectify trust after a situation like this, or even how they can build trust to begin with their teams?
Right. That's a great question. So one thing that they could do going forward is build a task force, perhaps including everyone from the front lines all the way through the call center or the organization to talk about, to be involved in these things. So if we're talking about performance and retention, having a retention task force, having a promotion and performance task force that really includes everyone, gets everyone at the table, diverse, inclusive teams, talking about what they want to accomplish, what the challenges are, and that way you can know what each segment of your employee population is going to think and how they might react to different interventions, and get everyone's commitment and enthusiasm going for whatever it is you're going to do. And there are so many great things that you could do. There's performance evaluations, and not just a formal performance evaluation system, but supporting and coaching your leaders to have those ongoing conversations, both about the employee and their goals and everything in general, but also to how they can have those difficult conversations when there are performance challenges and really support them over time. So having that candor and that authenticity, and supporting someone on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all tremendous points, just really involving, as many team members as appropriate in the decision-making process, and just, building your strategy, whether it's around engagement or development. I think even in addition to that, it's really important for leaders to keep their promises to their employees too. So leaders doing what they say they are going to do, really aligning their actions with their words. So like if we do go back to development as an example, if leaders are constantly promoting and supporting a culture of feedback and development, then their team should expect to see and be involved in processes that really back that up. So otherwise, if those promises are not kept, then we do end up with a breach of trust, and really keeping those promises is essential to maintaining that. So Jen, I know you had some other information you were excited to share regarding data law or some data regulations, if you'd like to touch on that.
Right. So the law that got this large retail company in trouble was the General Data Protection Regulation legislation passed by the EU recently, which affects a whole gamut of things, anything involving the transmission of personal data or acquiring employee data. So things like emails for retail marketing, all of that is affected by this. So it's quite transformational overall.
Sure, absolutely.
Sam, do you have any other suggestions for companies, like other ideas that came to mind of things that could have prevented this from happening? And we touched on, just performance feedback. Anything else that leaders could be thinking about if they feel like this resonates in some way?
Sure, absolutely. And we talked about the collection of more of like the personal data, which in this instance, and of course any instance, is just a huge negative. But I think what leaders can do, if they really are wanting to gain more insight into how their employees are feeling, or if there's anything that they can do to really drive and continuously improve the employee experience, annual engagement surveys or employee experience surveys can really help drive those points home. Even doing smaller pulse surveys once or twice a year.
Throughout the year.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Just checking in periodically to see how your teams are doing as it relates to things that are directly within the control of leadership, whether it's providing development opportunities or empowering, employees with the skills and resources to effectively carry out their jobs and perform exceptionally.
Right. So yeah, anything you can do to solicit or actively listen to your team, whether, ideally multiple points in the year, but maybe just getting started by, let's start with an annual survey if we're not doing it already, an annual employee experience survey, maybe complement that with some, focus groups and or interviews and things, and then go from there and see what your next step is on your journey from that. And if you can get up to doing pulse surveys or when there's hot topics, sending that out and distributing it throughout the teams to see how they feel about, new changes, maybe because of the pandemic or a new performance system or operating system or anything like that, that might affect their day to day, just to always be actively listening to your teams. And the formal mechanisms are phenomenal, but also just having that coaching and supporting your team to have those everyday conversations and always be aware of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Any efforts, I think you really hit that point home. Any efforts that you can make to actively listen to your teams and just make them feel like you're invested in their success and their well-being, just extremely important to morale and performance across the team. So
yeah, absolutely. And shared expectations, that all starts with having that constant connection with your team.
Yeah, 100% agreed with that. Well, Jen, it's been absolutely wonderful connecting with you this afternoon.
It has.
And
been a pleasure.
And we really encourage our viewers, if you enjoyed, the content information that we discussed today, just please give us your feedback in the comments. Or if there are additional topics that you'd like to see us cover in the future, we're open to your suggestions as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon.